Behind the Line, episode 11. I am your host, KC. Follow me on Twitter at KC_BTL84. Please make sure to hit the like and subscribe button on YouTube or any other platform that you're listening on. It goes a long way in supporting the podcast. I'm uploading a day early here. I'm going to be in New Orleans all weekend, and I thought about combining my college football bets with my NFL bets and uploading everything on Friday, but I kind of like to keep these podcasts, between 30 and 40 minutes or so. I don't want them to be too long, and I thought if I put the plays together, the podcast would just drone on too long. So I'm going to upload my college plays today, Thursday. I'm going to upload my NFL plays Friday morning, and then I'll be back Tuesday with the good and the bad and the ugly. I want to open today with the new law that passed in California on Tuesday, which made it legal for college athletes to be paid from endorsement deals, their images, their namesake, things of that nature. First off, I'm in complete support of this. I feel like this is long overdue, at least 2 decades overdue. Before the late 90s, early 2000s, college football wasn't what it is today. It was nowhere near as big as it is today in 2019. When Barry Sanders went to Oklahoma State in the 1980s, the majority of those games were not televised. These schools, these conferences, they didn't have these billion-dollar television deals that they have today. College athletes weren't as popular on a national level back then. In today's time, every game is on television. Doesn't matter what school you go to. If you go to Notre Dame, if you go to Ole Miss, if you go to Vanderbilt, every game is on television. The NCAA and these schools are making billions of dollars a year off of the backs of these young kids. So I feel like it's only fair to compensate them somehow. I don't think the school should pay them, because then you're going to get into a lot of legal issues. You're going to have to start paying the guys on the swim team or the lacrosse team when they don't really earn the money because their sports don't make any money. It bothers me that the government had to step in and do something about this. I don't like the government getting involved in the private sector. I don't like them getting involved in my life. I don't want them getting involved in my work life, private business. I don't like the government getting involved. But the NCAA has had years to solve this problem. We've been talking about this for at least the past 10 years. We all know that your star athletes get paid under the table. But for the past 10 or 15 years, this has been a topic of discussion every year. The NCAA has done nothing about it. Just like every other company in America, it's all about taking care of the few at the top and screwing the workers who are producing the product that the people consume. There are some issues going forward, I'll admit it. Unless other states are quick to follow California in passing similar legislation, this sets up schools in California at a huge advantage over other programs throughout the country. If you're a poor kid living in the projects in bumfuck rural Mississippi, you're a 5-star recruit, offers from all over the country. LSU, Ohio State, USC, everybody's knocking at your door. However, if you have the option to go to USC to have the potential to make hundreds of thousands of dollars off of endorsement deals, what the fuck do you think you're going to decide to do? It's an easy answer. The NCAA is in a weird position right now. Paying players is more difficult than most of us think. It's more difficult than I think. I'm sure there are a lot of nuances that they've got to figure out. Some will argue if you pay football players, you got to play tennis, golf, everybody else. I disagree with that. Like I said a minute ago, tennis and golf aren't revenue generators. Football and basketball fund every other sport at these schools. So in my opinion, those athletes are the only ones that should be eligible to be paid. What about baseball players, you might ask? No one gives a shit about college baseball. So that answers your question. If they did, we would be seeing college baseball on TV weekend afternoons in February, March, and April. We don't, for a reason, because no one watches. People will also argue that these are amateur athletes. I saw Lou Holtz talking about this on television this morning. It's partially true. Partially true. There's no doubt that top athletes in college football are being paid one way or another. Now, if you've listened to this podcast, you already know how I feel about the state of college football right now. So I'm not going to go into another rant about that. However, just think about this for a second. Wouldn't this be the perfect time for the NCAA to abolish these conferences and separate the major programs from the schools and the teams that can't be competitive? Teams like Florida A&M or Louisiana Monroe or that thing called Towson that Florida played last week, these teams will never have a shot at a national championship. Programs like this aren't going to be the schools that these paid athletes are attending. You can group the top 50 or so programs, create a sort of a miniature semi-professional football league, kind of like a minor league feeder system to the NFL, almost like it is now. Then maybe we could have a regular season in college football that actually mattered. Games that were actually close every weekend. Some people are making a big deal about this, about college athletes being paid. I saw an article saying that this could be extremely damaging to college sports. In my opinion, this could actually be very beneficial to college sports. Let's be honest here. How many college players do you think will actually get endorsement deals? The majority of these guys have no name value whatsoever, especially on a national level. I mean, the majority of your college athletes are unknowns. Other than Zion Williamson, how many players can you name from last year's NCAA tournament? RJ Barrett? The kid out of Murray State, John Morant? Other than those, I can't name another one. That's 3. You got 64 teams in that tournament. With what, 13 to 15 guys on the roster? You do the math. Football will have a few more popular athletes, but my point is, for the majority of these players, they're not going to be landing big endorsement deals. I think the new law has the potential to help college basketball big time. Not as much college football. The guys have to stay there for 3 years. The past 2 decades, college basketball has suffered from these one-and-done players. If these guys are already making money, perhaps that will entice them to stay in college for another year or 2, or maybe even finish out their degree. Now, the new law doesn't go into effect in California until 2023. That gives the NCAA 4 years to figure this out. It's going to be interesting to see what happens between now and then. I'm just glad that someone is finally holding their feet to the fire, because otherwise, we would still be talking about the NCAA and these schools screwing over these players 20 years from now. This same argument would come in time and time again. All right, I want to talk about the NFL for a minute. New England, San Francisco, and Kansas City are the only teams that remain unbeaten going into Week 5. I haven't completely bought into the 49ers just yet, but their road win at Tampa is looking better and better as the season progresses. We all know how great New England and Kansas City are. However, we got 7 teams right now that are sitting at 3-1. So what I wanted to do was, I wanted to go over these 3-1 teams, and I wanted to explain the ones that I'm most concerned about at this point of the season missing the playoffs. So let's list the teams that are 3-1 right now. The Buffalo Bills, Dallas, Green Bay, the Bears, the Saints, the Seahawks, and the Rams. I think the Packers will be fine. I like them to win their division, though I'm really starting to buy into the Detroit Lions. I was really impressed with them in their game against Kansas City on Sunday. Pat Mahomes still put up over 30 points, but the Lions were pressuring Mahomes throughout the game with 3 and 4 man fronts. Darius Slay was out, so they were missing their best cover corner and still had a chance to win that game, and they were still managing to find ways to pressure Patrick Mahomes the entire game. Same with the Saints. I'm not really worried about the Saints missing the playoffs. This defense has stepped up since Drew Brees injured his thumb. Schedule eases up a bit for them coming up in the next few weeks. I think the Brees injury is actually going to end up being a blessing in disguise. For one, I think it really shows the Saints that Teddy Bridgewater is not the successor to Drew Brees once he retires. Secondly, the past couple of years, Drew Brees' level of play has declined late in the season and going into the playoffs. He hasn't been the same quarterback in the month of December going into January. And I think a lot of that had to do with fatigue. He's just wearing down. I mean, for God's sakes, the guy's 40 years old. So it's to be expected. I think he returns by early November this year, well rested. The Saints win the NFC South almost by default. Atlanta and Carolina's on kind of an uptick right now. Atlanta's fucking finished. I don't have any faith in them. But I think the Saints win the NFC South. I actually think that the Saints represent the NFC in the Super Bowl. I don't see a team in the NFC beating New Orleans at home in the playoffs. And they're well positioned to be the number 1 seed as long as Teddy Bridgewater can hold out over these next few weeks. We'll see what happens going forward. I feel like the Rams are still going to make the playoffs. I think they'll be okay. This team is far too talented on both sides of the ball with one of the better coaching staffs in the league not to make the playoffs. They haven't looked like themselves the first 4 weeks of the season. They've struggled a bit offensively, and they've still managed somehow to be 3-1. I think they'll figure things out. I think they'll win the NFC West. The other 4 teams, I've got some real concerns about. Going to go over each one and explain why. Start with the Buffalo Bills. There's no doubt the defense in Buffalo is for real. Number 2 scoring defense, number 4 passing defense. I said it before. I think the Bills have the best defense in the NFL through 4 weeks. My concern with Buffalo, as I talked about on Tuesday during the Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, is the offense. More specifically, the turnovers. The defense has forced 8 turnovers. That's averaging 2 per game. You can't ask much more from your defense than that. So they're setting up this offense with good field position, short fields, limiting the opponent's possession. Yet the Bills' offense has managed to find a way to turn the ball over 10 times. Tied for worst in the NFL with the New York Giants and the Cincinnati Bengals. I've said it time and time again. You can't win consistently in the NFL with a negative turnover ratio. You damn sure can't win consistently turning the ball over 2.5 times a game. It's not going to happen. This is a real concern with this Buffalo Bills team. Most of these are not fluky turnovers either. The ball not going their way. That's not the case. They're horrible mistakes by Josh Allen. Can they clean it up? Maybe. I mean, Josh Allen, he's still a young quarterback, still trying to find his way. But I know one thing for certain. Buffalo is not making the playoffs if they keep turning the ball over at this rate. Next, the Dallas Cowboys. I got to admit, I'm kind of waffling back and forth about Dallas. Before the season, I didn't think they'd make the playoffs. But with the struggles in Seattle, Dallas might do enough to squeak in as a wild card. I actually, in my preseason playoff rankings, I had Seattle as the 6th and final wild card team, edging out Dallas. I don't know if that's going to be the case anymore. Even though they're 2-2, I still feel like the Eagles are the best team in the NFC East. Dallas concerns me because I don't buy into Dak in this offense. Mainly Dak. I've been one of very few so far this year that hasn't bought into the hype. Especially after they looked so good the first 3 games against god-awful defenses. We saw what happened when this team went up against a superior defense. They were completely shut down. I'm supposed to buy into Dak Prescott when he can't find a way to beat Teddy Bridgewater? Get the fuck out of here. The problem I have with Dallas is they're too reliant on the run. This is a passing league. I don't want to say they're one-dimensional, but for lack of a better term, I will. If you have a strong run defense and can take Zeke out of the game, you could completely shut down this Dallas offense. Saints provided the blueprint for the NFL on that. Seattle, on the other hand, I'm not sure what's going on right now in the Pacific Northwest. This defense made Teddy Bridgewater look like a competent quarterback. If you didn't watch this team and you just looked at the stats, you would think this is one of the better defensive units in the NFL. That's just not the case from what I've seen. This team struggled at home against the Cincinnati Bungles. People in Cincinnati were riding high after that loss because they thought they were going to have hope in 2019 because they played Seattle tough on the road. Turnaround got their asses kicked at home the next week by the 49ers. And proceeded to get their asses kicked the next 2 weeks. Seattle also struggled against a Pittsburgh team that didn't have Big Ben for over half the game. Right now, I've got 6 or 7 teams ahead of Seattle in the NFC. And their division alone, they're going to have to get through San Francisco and the Rams. The NFC West is a tough division. And I think Arizona will get better as the year goes on. I mean, they're not going to make the playoffs, but Kyler Murray will get better as the year progresses. Seattle doesn't have a running game. Offensive line is awful. Russell Wilson spends more time running for his life than he does looking downfield for open receivers. There's just a lot of holes on this Seattle team. Since Pete Carroll arrived, this roster was built on defense and a strong running game. The Legion of Boom is long gone. 2019, it's all on Russell Wilson this year to carry this team. Lastly, the Chicago Bears. Like the Buffalo Bills, the Bears have an elite defense that is hampered by a poor offense. At least Chicago's better at taking care of the ball. Mitch Trubisky's only thrown 2 interceptions so far. Take out the Monday night game they had against the atrocious Washington Redskins. Take that game out. This Bears offense averages around 11 points per game. That's nowhere near enough production from this offense for this team to be able to make the playoffs. This team ranks 28th in points per game, 30th in yards per game, 29th in passing, and 25th in rushing. That is not a good sign if you're a Chicago Bears fan. Schedule's about to get brutal. This week, they're going up against the improving Oakland Raiders, home versus the Saints and Chargers, at Philadelphia, then home against the Detroit Lions. It's unclear right now how many games Mitchell Trubisky is going to miss with his injury. But he wasn't playing all that well when he was healthy. Chase Daniel actually might be an improvement right now above Mitch Trubisky. Good thing for the Bears, though, is that traditionally, this is how they win in Chicago. Their defense makes it tough to win at Soldier Field. This same type of team took Rex fucking Grossman to the Super Bowl. So it can be done. I just don't know, though, if the Chicago Bears have enough this year to make the playoffs. The Detroit Lions and the Green Bay Packers are the 2 teams I see going for the NFC North division title. Couple of more things before I get to the college football plays. I just wanted to briefly touch on these 2 stories. First off, Kirk Cousins has a weekly show on Tuesdays on KFAN in Minneapolis. Most quarterbacks in the NFL have weekly shows, or at least weekly radio segments, on local stations in their home markets. Adam Thielen joined Cousins on his show this week, and the segment was pretty interesting. If you haven't listened to it, I encourage you to go check it out. Obviously, one of the main topics was the disaster of a game Sunday in Chicago. Kirk Cousins offered a pathetically weak-ass apology for his play, and specifically apologized for the easy touchdown pass that he overthrew Adam Thielen on in the first quarter. If I'm a fan of the Minnesota Vikings, or especially if I'm Adam Thielen, I don't want to hear fucking apologies. This isn't a personal relationship here. This is a business relationship. If I underperform at my job, my fucking boss doesn't want to hear me apologize. He wants to know what I'm doing to fix whatever I'm doing is wrong. We heard nothing to that effect from Kirk Cousins. It was almost like he was just trying to say the right thing. Look at me. I'm doing what's right here. Have pity on me. Forgive me. The reason why I don't think we heard anything like that from Kirk Cousins is because I don't think he can fix these issues, and I think he knows it. He's not going to wake up Sunday morning before the game against the Giants and magically become an accurate passer with the deep ball. I give him credit, though. He did address one issue. He admitted he checks down too much instead of looking downfield, so he's not finding wide open receivers. If I heard that from a competent quarterback, or even maybe a young quarterback, I'd believe it could be fixed. Kirk Cousins is 31 years old. He's been in this league for 8 years. Since becoming a starter in late 2014, he's been sacked 167 times. That's over 2 times a game. What that tells me is, you take away the short pass or the check down receiver, Cousins' ass is going down. He's not looking downfield. That's not getting fixed. At this point, Kirk Cousins is what he is. A dink and dunk passer who's hesitant in the pocket and unable to throw the ball downfield. If you judged Cousins based off of stats alone, you would think he's a good quarterback. Completing 66% of his passes on the year. He's thrown for about 735 yards. But this is why I say that stats can be misleading sometimes. They don't paint the whole picture. His stats Sunday against Chicago were great. 75% completion, 233 yards. You look at that and you think, oh, that's pretty good stat line, right? But they scored 6 fucking points. And that was a gift from the Chicago Bears in garbage time. What the fuck do good stats mean when you can't get in the fucking end zone? Nothing. Stephen A. Smith brought up something interesting on ESPN this morning regarding Kirk Cousins. Stephen A. is one of the few national talking heads that I like. I feel like he means what he says, and a lot of the time I agree with his opinions. He had spoken with several Redskins players over the years that played with Kirk Cousins. They all said the same thing. Cousins only cares about his stats. He plays too safe. Will take the short pass over the risky deep throw so he doesn't risk making a mistake. Also, he does that to keep his completion percentage high. Doesn't have a strong enough will to win. There's nothing left for me to say after hearing a report like that. That's as strong of an indictment as you can get to explain why Kirk Cousins doesn't belong on an NFL team. It wouldn't shock me if the Vikings cut their losses and cut him. They'd have to eat the remainder of his contract, but because it's fully guaranteed. So they have to eat the $28 million over the next 2 seasons. But they've got too good of a team and too short of a window right now surrounding Kirk Cousins for them to not be winning football games. And more importantly, for them to be losing the way that they're losing. The defense is not losing games. Dalvin Cook is balling out. You got 2 talented receivers, a decent offensive line, good coaching staff. Mike Zimmer's a hell of a coach. The only common denominator in these losses is Kirk Cousins. And he hasn't helped them win a game yet this year. Dalvin Cook has just been balling the fuck out in the 2 wins that they've got. When this is all said and done, no matter how it works out, whether Minnesota cuts Kirk Cousins and part ways or he plays out the remainder of his contract, there is not a doubt in my mind that this will go down as one of the worst, if not the worst, free agent contract signings in the history of the National Football League. A little bit of NBA news before we get to the college plays that has nothing to do with the game on the court. I just thought this story was interesting. Shaquille O'Neal and Damian Lillard both have released diss tracks on each other this week. Not sure how many of you are fans of hip-hop music. I grew up on it. I still keep up with it a little bit. I don't like a lot of the new mumble rap. I prefer the rap that I grew up on. But I'm still in tune to what's going on in the hip-hop culture. But if you're a fan of hip-hop, you know how important beefs or diss tracks are to the culture. There have been some legendary beefs over the past, 20, 30 years in hip-hop. I don't think for 1 second that Shaquille O'Neal and Damian Lillard will ever be considered comparable to like Biggie and Tupac or Jay-Z and Nas or anything like that. I think for the most part, this is just them two guys having fun with each other. This all started, Damian Lillard was on Joe Budden's podcast last week and proclaimed that he was a better rapper than Shaq. I actually agree with him. I didn't think Shaq was all that great as a rapper, but he has a comedic aspect about him that's untouchable. Shaq is one of the better personalities and one of the funnier dudes the NBA's ever seen. Anyway, Shaq responded to Dame's comment with a diss track. Dame replied back. Now the debate rages on about who won, whose song was better. Like I said, I think Damian Lillard is a better rapper. And his flow was definitely better than Shaq's, but I thought Shaq had the better punchlines. I caught myself laughing out loud several times throughout Shaq's record. Never laughed one time at Damian Lillard's. But I can see why people think Dame had the better song. His song was put together better. I've also seen debate as to who was the better NBA player. Now to me, this argument's not even close. In his prime, Shaquille O'Neal was the most dominant player in the league by a mile. It was not even close. No one could guard him. Only thing that you could do to slow Shaq down was to intentionally foul him late in the game and send him to the free throw line. Not to mention, Shaq's got the rings. Damian Lillard has none. Dame's a great guard, but he isn't even the best point guard in the NBA in his era. People debate about Shaq being the best big man of all time. That's what ends the debate for me right there. We saw a couple of years ago in the playoffs, Drew Holiday and Rajon Rondo completely shut down Dame Lillard and CJ McCollum in their series against New Orleans. Tell me one time in the prime of his career that Shaq was dominated. End of discussion. It's going to be a great year this year in the NBA. Both conferences are about as equally balanced as they've been in a long time. West is wide open right now with Golden State kind of in a state of decline. Both the Clippers and Lakers going to be good. Going to be an exciting season for my New Orleans Pelicans. I cannot wait for the NBA to tip off in a couple of weeks. All right, let's get to the college football plays for the weekend. Auburn at Florida. Current line, Auburn -2.5. I think Florida is one of the most overrated teams in the country. I've got no idea how this team is ranked in the top 10. Even with a healthy Felipe Franks, I didn't think this team deserved to be ranked in the top 10. Backup quarterback Kyle Thrash has looked good in his first couple of starts, but Florida hasn't played anyone. And honestly, they haven't played anyone all year. 2 of their 5 games have been against FCS opponents. Of course, Thrash has looked good in his 2 games against Tennessee and Towson, but, that's not saying shit. He's going to get a real test Saturday afternoon. I've said it all season. Auburn's defense is real. They're also the more experienced team. Auburn beat Oregon to open the season, went on the road in a hostile environment, and dominated Texas A&M. Bo Nix seems to be coming along. The true freshman has had some struggles throughout the year. Don't get me wrong. But that's to be expected. However, he had his best game of the season last week against Mississippi State. He's shown improvement through every game this year. And the tough environment in Gainesville, I don't think it's going to rattle him too much since he's already faced a tough environment when they played Texas A&M on the road. Auburn's got the superior defense and the superior running game. Two things that are required to win and cover on the road. They've covered their past 5 games against Florida. I like them here in a low-scoring affair, taking Auburn -2.5 on the road against Florida. Next up, Washington at Stanford. Current line, Washington -16. I said this last week when I saw the Washington line against USC, and I'm going to say it again now. I could not believe this point spread when I saw it. The Huskies are talented offensively. 2 good running backs in Salvon Ahmed and Richard Newton. Got an NFL caliber quarterback in Jacob Eason. Eason has been impressive this year. Already thrown for over 1,000 yards, limited his turnovers, and thrown 10 touchdown passes. Washington also plays well defensively. After backup USC quarterback Matt Fink decimated a talented Utah defense, the Huskies brought him back to earth last week. They're getting another backup quarterback this week. KJ Costello is still out, so Stanford is starting Davis Mills. Now, Mills looked good against Oregon State, but Oregon State's a fucking dumpster fire. Big thing here for me is the Stanford defense against the Washington offense. Stanford's defense sucks. Gave up 28 points to Oregon State, 45 points to Central Florida, and 45 points to USC. I don't think they have the depth defensively to keep this game close. It concerns me a bit that Washington's 3-8 against the spread in their last 11 road games. And I don't like swallowing this many points, especially on the road in a conference game. But I like Washington to win here big. Line open to 13, been bet up to 16, might reach 17 by kickoff, taking Washington -16. All right, final game, Michigan State at Ohio State. Current line is Ohio State -2.5, 20.5. Sorry, not 2. If you can find Ohio State -2.5, let me know. Current line, Ohio State -20.5. The Big Ten might be the most top-heavy conference in college football. Ohio State is in a different league than every other team, and it's not even close. This is the 4th time in the past 5 years that the Buckeyes are double-digit favorites against the Michigan State Spartans. What is there really to say about Ohio State? The offense is prolific, averages 53 points and over 500 yards a game. The defense is dominant, gives up about 9 points a game. In the past, I would have taken Michigan State here. They usually play Ohio State really tough and keep the game relatively close, especially when they're double-digit dogs. They're 2-1 against the number, the last 3 against Ohio State when they're a double-digit dog. But this just isn't the same type of Michigan State team that I'm accustomed to seeing. This team struggled to beat Indiana last week at home, a team that Ohio State routed. Michigan State lost at home to Arizona State. Head coach Mark D'Antonio doesn't have the depth of talent this year to keep this game close against a highly talented Ohio State team. Much like last week against Nebraska, I think the Buckeyes run away with this thing early. Ohio State has proven that they can cover the big number. Covers 7 straight against teams with a winning record, 4-0 against the spread this year, and have covered 6 straight after winning their previous game by 20-plus points. They are dominating every game that they play. Ohio State's won by 20-plus points 10 of their last 12 home games. I think they cover this game with ease, taking Ohio State -20.5. So just to recap here, heavy on favorites this week in college football. Taking Auburn -2.5, Washington -16, and Ohio State -20.5. All right, I'm out of here, guys. Just a reminder, I will be back tomorrow morning instead of Saturday morning with my NFL bets for Sunday. Hit the like and subscribe button. Leave your comments in the section below. Let me know which college football games you're taking this weekend. Follow me on Twitter at KC_BTL84. I will see you guys tomorrow morning.